Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today by Cade Hampton of the Tuscaloosa News. We are going to talk about Alabama baseball, a team that you may have checked out on a little bit, under 500, 7-11 league. You might say to yourself, well, okay, that's probably it for that team. They're a bubble team at best, but don't look now. There's some positives. The schedule left in front of them is pretty favorable relative to what it could be and what it has been. So we will jump into all of that with Cade here in just a second. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Pitch Logic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy-to-use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. First off, Cade, I appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Cade is the next in line of a series of guests that I have that make me feel increasingly old every single week. Cade's still technically a student at the University of Alabama, getting ready to graduate this May. So I guess also a congrats are in order, Cade. But Cade has been doing a fantastic job covering the Tide baseball team, also gymnastics. It's a little bit of an interesting beat there he's on. But he's been doing a fantastic job covering the baseball team. And like I said, there's plenty to get to. I guess the first thing, Cade, let's zoom in before we zoom out. Last 2 weekends, the Tide have played Arkansas. They played Texas A&M. Both teams were number one when they played them. They get out of that 3-3. So even though those were home series, I have to imagine the perception is, hey, you know what? We'll take 3-3 every time against teams of that caliber.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially with the Kentucky series immediately preceding the Arkansas series, which was a really rough one for them on the road. I think being able to come back home and kind of get back on their feet and sort of test themselves against two really, really high quality opponents and two kind of different opponents, because Arkansas has really made their money on, or made their living on pitching, strong pitching, but the offense has been kind of meh, which Alabama took advantage of. And then Texas A&M really just kind of was hammering the zone, getting a hold of all the pitches that Alabama was throwing at them. So it was two kind of different teams, but still being able to go 3-3 against opponents like that. The team's really made some strides this year, and you can really see the difference, kind of especially from the beginning of SEC play.
One thing that the team has had to fight through are just various issues on the mound, right? Injuries, Riley Quick, Hagan Banks, guys who just haven't performed like expected, Ben Hess, Aiden Moza, and yet they're cobbling it together. I'm not going to lie to the listeners and say it's been perfect or it's been great or any of that, but they've cobbled it together. So to what do you give that? Like what has allowed the pitching staff to cobble through the way it has?
So yeah, I think the biggest thing in terms of the pitching staff has been the teams keeping Jason Jackson in tow. Jason, after the whole incident last year with Brad Bohannon getting fired, Jackson stepped in as the interim head coach, and I think he had kind of a lot of support from within to just kind of take over as the head coaching job. But the team brought in Rob Vaughn from Maryland, and they made Jackson the associate head coach and the pitching coach. And every time we talk to the pitchers, they always have great things to say about him and the work that he does. And like you said, it's been kind of an up and down season. With Quick getting injured after I think he pitched 3 innings in the first series and then was done for the year. And then Hagan Banks also getting called out for the year. He had just kind of worked his way into a starting role when he went out too. So yeah, just a couple of issues here and there, but I think it's really kind of come together. Zane Adams has really had a breakout on the mound lately. His performance in the third game against Arkansas to clinch the series was just probably easily the best pitching performance we've seen from an Alabama pitcher this year. And that's a true freshman coming in doing that against a team that was ranked number 1 at the time. So that was really encouraging. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just they've gotten some good play out of the bullpen. It's been kind of inconsistent, but yeah, I think they've got a solid starting rotation that I think they believe in, with Ferrone and Hess and Adams on weekends, and then Cade Snell, who's also really broken out as the DH for the midweek games. So they've got, I think, a good starting rotation that they believe in, and they've got a good collection of arms out of the bullpen who you kind of want to see a little bit more consistency from those guys. But a lot of them are young. They're improving, and that they can put together some really good games.
You mentioned Zane Adams, and you're right to call that, not only the best performance for an Alabama pitcher, but when you think about the team that he was pitching against, the moment, the fact that he's a freshman, all that stuff together, it's right up there with the best performances we've seen from any SEC pitcher in SEC play this season. What did you get from whether him or Coach Vaughn or Coach Jackson or whatever after that performance that was kind of going well for him? And then how much of that is repeatable? Because of course he is a freshman, and like, this is the SEC. It's not going to be that easy every week, as we already seen since that outing.
Yeah. Well, I think the main pitches that were working for him were kind of the breaking balls, the curve balls, all that. He was really just taking advantage of those, and just really attacking the zone. And Coach Vaughn was really proud of him. He said the whole performance, the whole team's performance really started with Zane on the mound that day. They really pulled through, and when a pitcher puts together a performance like that, especially a young guy, the entire team kind of sees that, and they're like, we got to give him the support that he needs to get this win, because he earned it with the way he was playing that day. It was just a really great performance. And then this past weekend against Texas A&M, kind of not as great of a performance. Definitely, like I said earlier, a much tougher kind of offensive lineup that the Aggies have there, especially that top of the lineup is just absolutely brutal. So, but he still, put together a solid, first couple innings, he was solid. And then right before they pulled him, they kind of, he got into a jam a little bit. And then that was when they pulled him and put Tyler Fay in, who also ended up kind of having a much better day in that third game than he did. I think it was the first game of the doubleheader against A&M. But yeah, Adams really looking up. He's kind of bounced around the lineup. He was the midweek pitcher, I think, before Quick went down, and kind of put in some work as a reliever on weekends. But now I think he's kind of firmly entrenched as that weekend starter, and he'll continue to progress as the season goes on and as his career continues.
One thing that, as I mentioned, one thing that the pitching staff has also had to overcome are guys that just haven't quite been to the level of expectation. I think the number one on that list is Ben Hess. I'm sure it's been asked about 1 million times by you and the rest of the media after games. Is there anything you can point to as what the issue has been with Ben Hess? Because it's not just that he's been inconsistent. I mean, his ERA in SEC play, I think, is above 10. So it's just not going well. Like, because I'm sure you guys have asked 1 million times, what kind of answers have you guys gotten about Ben Hess?
Yeah, those we haven't really asked that much about Hess. Those outings where he, especially this last weekend, he got injured right away. A ball kind of got hit right back into him, and he was injured for all of last season pretty much. So I'm not sure if it's really kind of an adjustment of the injury that he had, or if it might just come down to kind of a lack of creativity, perhaps. He really is reliant on the power pitching, the fastball, but I'm not sure he has as much sort of finesse as, like, Greg Ferrone or even Adams have kind of shown with the breaking balls. So, and the SEC is just an absolute gauntlet of good hitting teams, and I think he's had some rough outings, especially against teams like Tennessee and Texas A&M, especially. That was a really rough one, but those are two of the best hitting teams in the country and in the conference. So. Yeah, just I think as the rest of this, like you mentioned earlier, the rest of the SEC schedule isn't looking as daunting as the gauntlet that they had early in the season. So I think he'll put together some improved performances in those next couple of series, but it's definitely something to watch for, and yeah, just not something that anyone really expected coming in. He was kind of the especially early in the season in non-conference play, he was kind of looking like the ace pitcher. He put together a really good game at the Frisco Classic. I believe it was against Indiana. That was definitely his best game of the year. But
I was just going to say that's part of what's been so perplexing about it, right? Is that, like, it's not like from the jump this year, it's just been Ben Hess wasn't right. It's just been as he's in particular as SEC play has gotten underway. But to your point, I think with the schedule maybe lightening up just a little bit. Maybe there's an opportunity for him to pitch his best baseball still ahead, and that's kind of ultimately what you're looking for from a guy like that. Let's flip to the lineup for a second.
Hmm.
Gage Miller has been obviously the breakout star offensively. What were kind of your personal expectations, if any, going into the season? What did you heard about him, and then just how important has he been as the guy to be the centerpiece of this lineup?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the lineup, they really didn't return a lot of production from last year's team. I think they only had, in terms of like the starting lineup, I think Matt Gussetti was really the only guy to return at the catcher spot. Um, but yeah, Miller was honestly Miller kind of caught me by surprise. I kind of more was anticipating, especially after what we saw in their kind of their first spring training game leading up into the game. I was expecting a lot of the offensive production to come from Will Hodo and TJ McCants. So to see Miller come out and just every single game as the leadoff hitter, just easily be the most productive guy, it was a bit of a surprise to me, but it definitely was not a surprise to the coaching staff. Vaughn absolutely loves Gage Miller. He just hits, man. He goes out there, he hits baseballs, he gets on base. I think his first like 35 or 36 games he got on base this year, and it took him until the Texas A&M game to have a game where he didn't get on base once. So just he leads the team in home runs. I think he's up there in terms of the whole country in home runs hit. So yeah, just a great guy. They love having him at the leadoff spot there. He's really been kind of the spark plug for the offense.
You mentioned earlier Cade Snell getting hot. He's definitely been a big part of helping this team overcome what it's had to overcome. He started the year off dealing with an injury and kind of rehabbing from that. So is it just as simple as Cade Snell has gotten healthy and gotten more opportunities, or is there something else going on that you think has allowed Cade Snell to become the type of hitter that I think we kind of expected him to be going into the season?
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it just is the opportunity and the health thing. Like you mentioned, it's they kind of started the season cycling through a couple of names at designated hitter. We saw Mason Swinney, William Hammett, or Cole Hammett, I think it is, or no, Coleman Mazzell and William Hammett. I'm
Will Hammond. Yeah, you got it. You got it.
so many guys.
A lot of names.
But yeah, but yeah, no. Snell has really kind of been breaking out. I mentioned earlier he kind of has established himself as the midweek starter on the mound, but he's also kind of firmly entrenched into that DH role now. And the last Texas A&M game that they ended up winning, Snell was like 5 for 5 at the plate. He hit every ball. He had, I think, a double in just about every game that series. So for him to establish himself in that role, and especially to do so against the last two opponents that they've seen with Arkansas and Texas A&M, it's a pretty encouraging for him to put together those performances against teams with such good pitching play, that you're encouraged moving forward. You feel a lot more confident in Snell in that role moving forward.
Justin LeBron's been a guy that's been interesting to follow. It says a lot about a player if they can come in and be a starting shortstop right away in the SEC. It says even more about a guy if they can hold on to that position, because history
Hmm.
is littered with examples of guys who got an opening day start, but then ultimately kind of faded when the realities of the SEC came to pass. He actually, in some ways, has, he went through a little bit of a lull and now has started to play better again.
Yeah.
Um, how impressive has that been for a first year guy to come in and honestly be one of the most consistent performers for this team so far?
Oh yeah, no, they absolutely love this kid. I heard a lot of good things about him coming into the season. And even the last two series, he's worked his way up as the number three hitter. Um, so we've seen the kind of lineup shift, but LeBron as the number three hitter has seemed to really kind of work for the offense. And yeah, he's just, I mean, the consistency and the attitude and professionalism that you see from such a young guy. It's really something you like to see moving forward. Vaughn has said that he's kind of the future of this program moving forward. So yeah, he did kind of have a little bit of a lull offensively, like you mentioned, when SEC play started, which I think is just kind of an adjustment that you'll see any freshman kind of have to make, especially, going from kind of a lackluster, if we're being honest, non-conference schedule for Alabama to, Tennessee was the very first like SEC series, which is, and then they had, I think, Georgia after that, who's really great. And so just, like I mentioned earlier, the gauntlet of the SEC schedule, that's going to be an adjustment for any guy who is fresh out of high school and then has only played, a handful of really good teams to start the season. But yeah, as the SEC play has gone on, LeBron has really adjusted well. He has had some great offensive performances. I think he had 2 home runs in the one game against A&M where, they kind of got blown out. I think they gave up 8 runs in like the second inning, but LeBron put up 2 home runs in that game. And where else he's really impressed me personally, just his play in the infield. He doesn't let a lot of balls get by him. He had one, I think it was the second game against Arkansas. It was this diving catch that was just like spectacular at the end of the game, like crunch time, ninth inning. And, if that ball gets by him, Arkansas looking like they have a serious chance to come back, but he just makes a, spectacular athletic play and then gets up, throws absolute strike to first base to get the out. And the whole team, the whole stadium just erupted right there. And so, yeah, he has been a really, quality, consistent player, something you love to see for a young guy and something that they'll need to continue moving forward.
My last question for you has to do with something we've touched on a couple of times, and it's just that, on paper, you look at Bama sitting below 500 in conference, and it's easy to kind of say, boy, their backs are really against it. And to some degree, that's true. They don't have a lot of slack left. However, you look at the last 4 weekends, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Now those two are on the road, then LSU, and then Auburn, which the last one's also on the road.
Yeah.
But those 4 teams are all winnable series, I guess is what I'm getting at. So how much optimism should there be about just the way the team has played the last few weeks? I mean, if you can go 3-3 against Arkansas and A&M, you can beat just about anybody. Mm-hmm. And then B, just the winnable series ahead of them to be able to get their record to a place where they can be back in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, looking at it on paper, this team just kind of looks like your, middle of the pack SEC team, but really, they're playing their best baseball as of late. They have really come along. I think Vaughn has put together a lineup that he really likes, and I think they're getting good production out of the bullpen, especially against Arkansas. That series, I think, ultimately came down to them kind of outdueling Arkansas on the mound, which is something you love to see because, like I said, Arkansas probably the best pitching team in the country. So, yeah, the last couple series, they're like you said, they're all very winnable, but and there definitely should be some optimism coming into these series. Alabama, the way they've been playing, they shouldn't have any trouble. They might drop a road game here or there, but they shouldn't have any trouble winning these last 4 series. And but what my biggest concern is that the road series we've seen against Georgia and against Kentucky, they were essentially like non-competitive, especially against Kentucky. It was just a total, total mess. They really were. They came out flat, and they never really fought. They never really got back in it, and I think they ended up having to play a doubleheader, so that that's never easy. But still, you want to see a little bit more kind of fight when you get into a situation like that. I think Kentucky was kind of slept on going into that, but they really just took it to them. And I think there's kind of been a turnaround since then because after that series, they also dropped a midweek game against South Alabama, which they were up 4-0 and then kind of let it get away from them, ended up losing 5-4. And, Coach Vaughn wasn't super happy about that one, but then, they turned around, beat Arkansas. So ever since then, with the lineup adjustments, things have been good. But, winning on the road in the SEC is really tough. And even when the competition isn't, Georgia or Kentucky level, you don't want to play down to your opponent, especially on the road, because Ole Miss, Mississippi State, while they haven't been, and even Auburn, even though they haven't been at their, absolute best this season, you never want to go into a road series expecting to, to just win it. You want to, come in and take care of business, play up to your standard, and get out of there with the wins that you need, especially at, this pivotal point in the season where they're kind of on the bubble, looking at into the postseason coming up.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's no such thing as a bad road win in the SEC. All road wins are good wins because it's just you can't waltz into anybody's stadium, even Auburn, who's in last place. You can't just waltz in there and play a C+ game and expect to win, and that's what makes it tough. But your point is well taken that these last 4 series provide an opportunity to get Alabama back in position to be in the postseason, especially given that their RPI, for those who are following that kind of stuff, I mean, it's top 20 RPI, and that's ultimately going to be a big part of their resume. Cade, first off, appreciate you joining us again. Real quick, let's let you plug where they can find your work, the social media stuff, all that good stuff. Let us know.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. My @ is CadeBH13. So it's just my name, CADE, and then BH13. And then I am also, you can find me on, I write for the Tuscaloosa News. You can just, search for my name on there. Any Alabama baseball, gymnastics coverage from the past year, that'll be me. So, yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And yeah, absolutely.
Cade Hampton, Tuscaloosa News, appreciate him for joining us. We also appreciate Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. And we appreciate you, the listeners, for listening.